Welcome back to the Fear and Beer podcast,
where we discuss all things Halloween Horror Nights, horror movies, and just a little bit of beer.
So kill the lights, grab a cold one, and join us as we dive into this mad world we love.
I'm Nick.
I'm Seamus.
And I'm Jamie.
Like scary movies.
Uh-huh.
Here's Johnny.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You miss me.
Aren't you drinking?
I never drink. Why?
And as a reminder to all listening, if you want to help us to continue growing as a podcast, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on whichever streaming platform you use.
To stay up to date with us and all of our episodes, be sure to follow all of our socials. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Fear and Beer Pod.
Feel free to reach out to us. We love to interact with you all.
Week 2 of no announcement. We've been waiting an entire week and we didn't get an announcement this week. It's crazy. It's like we waited months and months and months and months.
Not fair.
And we didn't get 2 back-to-back. It's insane.
It's not fair. It's not fair. They're holding out on us and it's driving us nuts.
They got the goods. They got the goods and they won't give it to us. All right. Well, this week we threw together a episode pretty last minute because we're in that portion of our year where we are just kind of sitting back and waiting because typically Thursday announcements are a thing. I didn't really expect one this week, to be honest.
No.
We wait regardless. So that way, in case something does drop, we can talk about it on our episode. That was not the case this week. So this week, what we decided to do is kind of dive into, there really wasn't a lot of speculative stuff this week that I could find, but the stuff that I did see posted kind of gave us a little avenue to talk about some stuff. So obviously we've talked in the past about Oddfellow and the rumored house that could be coming this year. And there was some sort of little rumory, leaky kind of thing that happened. So we decided that this week we're going to dive into the history of Oddfellow just a bit. So Jamie's going to be talking about the whole backstory and lore of Oddfellow and Jack the Clown. And then we'll kind of discuss Oddfellow's actual appearances at HHN. So that's what we got going on today. And before we get started, I guess our little intro again for this month, we are still in our HHN at home month. Our contest is still running. So go to our Twitter page. It is still our pinned tweet. All you have to do is make a donation towards the Trevor Project. On that tweet, post your donation. That's how many entries you are going to get into our little raffle. We're going to raffle off 2 shirts, 2 winners, and that will be drawn on our episode next week. It's already the end of June for next week. So that will be coming to a close shortly. So get in before time runs out. And as we mentioned, shirts, the winners get 2 shirts. But if you would like, our shirts are actually on sale right now. So if you go to our TeePublic page, I believe they're $16 and everything is 35% off. So if you want a different style shirt, if you want stickers or buttons or whatever, you can purchase those all on our TeePublic page. All of our new designs are there. So let's get into some beer. I got one. It doesn't really tie in at all, but I bought this based off of just it looked kind of creepy. The can art looks like little intestine-y red people. I don't know. They look like blood cells. I don't know. It's crazy. They're coming out of a little dark hole, but this is actually Static God. This is from Resident Culture Brewing Company from Charlotte. Again, found this at Half Barrel Project. It is a 6.75% IPL. So it's an Indian Pale Lager. So that's a new one for me. I guess it's a West Coast style IPL with Citra, Mosaic, and Simcoe hops. So that's what I got for myself. So I'm going to crack this open. Yeah, it was
an IPL before.
Yeah, that's an IPL, an India Pale Lager. That's definitely a different take on things. So I'm curious. That West Coast stuff is kind of funky. It's very almost piney at times.
Yeah, it's probably just some form of something from the brewing process of on an IPA, and they just took that and they're like, let's make a lager using the same process. I'm sure it's something to do with that. I mean, as we've stated before, like, you know, the difference between like a lager and an ale is kind of like how they brew it, when they put the hops in, when they put all this stuff in, and it can kind of change, like whether it's a lager or an ale. But, you know, for most normie beer drinkers, I don't think they really would notice a difference. But, you know, and I'm not exactly a professional beer drinker, or I mean, I don't know everything or anything, but it's interesting. I've never really had one of those before, but
It's very light looking. It's crazy. I expected an IPL. Lagers and IPAs I always seem to view in my head as that darker color, but this is very light looking. It's not completely translucent, so it looks like if there was a light blue moon is almost the appearance of it.
Interesting.
It smells very hoppy off the nose, but it's weird because it's giving me almost East Coast IPA scent. Like it's almost like that Citra hop is big, but I didn't think Citra. You can correct me if you're wrong, but I thought Citra was primarily like an East Coast style, not a West Coast.
No, I mean,
it was both.
Citra
maybe
can be used Citra is used in a lot of different things. It's generally found in like New England IPAs because it gives that citrus, that fruitier grapefruit flavor. It gives that profile, so that's why they use it a lot in the New England style IPAs. But they're used generally in a lot of different IPAs if they're looking for that sweeter taste. Like, because there are some West Coast IPAs that definitely are more resiny, more piney, like you were saying, but they may want to throw in some of that grapefruit feel to it, so they throw in Citra, or they use Citra. It's a popular hop for the most part, and I forget where it's from specifically. I don't know if it's California or if it's something non-American, but I'm not entirely sure. Someone have to correct me on that.
I'll tap into this real quick. If anybody else is drinking anything else, they want to jump in, feel free.
If you expect me to have anything important, I'm killing werewolves again tonight.
I actually have one tonight.
Oh, let's go.
I know. Unfortunately, it's something I've had before, but I'm having Watermelon Girlfriend. Right. Watermelon Girlfriend from Prairie Artisan Ales, which is a sour ale with watermelon, sea salt, orange, lemon, and lime.
Yeah, this is it's got a pretty strong punch it in the mouth upfront IPA taste.
Yeah, which is again weird. I don't understand the lager side of it. There's got to be something they put in it, or
I've never heard of that before.
I don't know what defines it either.
Huh?
I don't know what part of the process.
You've never heard of an IPL before, but I mean,
I know, right?
Is not. Yeah, I don't know. I've never actually heard of that. But then again, I didn't realize like white stouts were a thing, or like
there's so many different variations now that it's just like impossible.
A dark IPA, which is like different too, but the thing is, the beauty of brewing, is that there are just so many different things that like you can do these days. But
yeah, so let's jump into just a quick little speculation scuttlebutt. There was only two things that I took note of. I'll go into the first one because I had already mentioned it. There was a post that our friends over at the RIP tour had found, they credited Drew on Twitter for this find, but it's a screenshot of the blog Discover Universal page. So it's their official page. And there's really not much on it, but it is a little article. But the article is titled "I Follow Oddfellow," and it is from June 21st, 2023. It just says, "Epic in your inbox. Never miss a thrill. Subscribe now to get email updates from Universal Park." So it's pretty much just a subscription, or registering to get updates in your email. But the title, "I Follow Oddfellow," was the interesting part. And the page has since been removed. So it was a quick little blink and if you miss it kind of thing. But it's interesting that they were titling it that. And that sort of led people to think maybe we'd get some sort of announcement on Thursday. Of course, that did not happen. So this might be something that we see next week or the following weeks. I'm curious if they're going to announce it as a house/icon, or if they're just going to drop it as Oddfellow is the icon. It's just interesting that is what kind of leaked out, unfortunately, on their end. But it's made its rounds for sure, and I think that's going to start maybe tying into all of these legend references in the videos, in the marketing. The legend is real. Have you heard about the legend of Horror Nights? And we'll get into that once we get into the actual meat and potatoes of the episode. But pretty interesting that this sort of leaked out. This wasn't somebody just saying, oh, well, I heard. This was a screenshot from the actual Universal website. So are you buying into this Oddfellow fellow?
So I didn't even realize that it was from the actual Universal website, because I had seen the post on Twitter as well, and I saw that it was Universal Blogs, and I was like, oh, I wonder if that's just like a random blog page. But knowing now that it's from that makes it a little more interesting, I think, because there's really no other connection to Oddfellow other than that I would think of, like, throughout the parks and stuff, to be signing up for a mailing list. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and what else are you referencing in this name? There's nothing else called Oddfellow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty legit, but at the same time, like, I guess you never know. I mean, I don't want to say that
nothing, but
I mean, I don't want to say that they overthink it and they put things out there just to get people to talk. I think they do that a little bit, but this seems like it's almost like it wasn't supposed to come out. But I'm interested. Like we said, I think we talked about it last week. This would come up before, and I mean, I'm interested to see the side of the story. I'm not wild about Jack all over again, but if it's maybe a different story that's kind of expanding on the lore and less about him specifically, I'd be okay with it. But yeah, as far as this is coming out, I mean, I guess I'm 50-50 on it. I think I could see it being a problem. I could see it like being like an actual leak that wasn't supposed to get out, but at the same time, I could also see it being that, you know, it's just people looking into it, or they're trolling or something like that. Because I mean, this was being talked, right? I mean, this was something kind of being bandied about, the whole Oddfellow guy coming back, or somebody had mentioned something. So maybe maybe they saw that and they're just like, let's feed the trolls a little bit. Maybe
that's what I was thinking too.
Let's see if all the podcasters talk about this.
Exactly, and I think and that's a real thing. I mean, they totally do that, and
yeah,
we know that for a fact that they do that. So they'll see what people are talking about. They'll throw things out there, and then they know that people like us are going to talk about it on our little shows. So
I mean, if I was in their shoes, I definitely would be putting random crap out all the time.
100%. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll save the rest of the Oddfellow talk for a couple minutes, because really the only other thing that I just kind of came across was a potential, and this one I put really not much behind it, but there was talks that possibly next week we'll be getting a Monsters announcement. You know, I had originally thought Monsters was the first announcement of last year was Monsters, so I kind of just thought that that's sort of their easiest, safest bet. I'm sure they lock that one in pretty easily. It's Universal movie property, so they don't have to worry about something dropping, and they can schedule that release without having to worry about scrambling if something falls through. But
yeah, I mean, technically, it could still be our first real new announcement, because if you think about it, you know, we knew about Chucky a year ago, and I mean, and The Last of Us was the worst kept secret of all things. So I think it's like, I think maybe that'll be the next full announcement. Will be the Monsters House, because it's kind of like The Last of Us. Everybody knows it's coming. It's just in what form are we going to get it? I know that like, not to get back into it, but I'm hoping for the Paris one. I'm hoping for that Hunchback one, or at least something along those lines.
I would like
what other people are expecting, but you know, I would think that would be the next thing that they bring up. Or
we talked about Hunchback and Phantom last year. Did we talk about it? In our way too early predictions, we were saying we hope Phantom.
Yeah, I think we were talking about the Monsters House, and we both had said that, like, you know,
just want something different.
We would like to see something different. Yeah, not just like the usual characters,
the main three.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So with that being said, that's really all I could kind of scurry up. It was a busy week. The servers that I peruse were 99% just filler talk and 1% of actual talking points that we could actually bring up. So
what we call scuttlebutt.
Yes, hearsay. So that's what we had. Obviously, as we get closer to announcements, I think that the speculation starts to die down a little bit, just because everything that needed to be said has been said at some point. Now it's just a matter of the waiting game of confirmation of if most of those are accurate or not. So I'm expecting a speculation map probably in July at some point from Horror Night Nightmares. They haven't stated when they're going to be dropping another one, but mid-July, early July seems in my mind to be that time frame.
Yeah.
So we'll just kind of wait and see until we talk on that. So let's move on into our main segment. And I think the easiest way to kind of go about this, because this is a tricky character. He's been at HHN in a minimal capacity, but has his backstory really intertwined with the most prominent figure of Horror Nights, with that being Jack the Clown. And the history that he has physically at HHN was so long ago that the majority of evidence is just non-existent. You know, back at HHN 10 was when his house was. So there's really not much physical pictures. You know, this is what he is. He was definitely here. It's a lot of, he may have been in the house. We're not sure, but there's definitely no pictures. So there's a lot of deep dive into this backstory of Jack to try to figure out who this Oddfellow character is. And I have some knowledge. You know, I'm not going to say I'm a whiz on all this stuff, because the HHN lore is just, you could spend forever deep diving into characters and sub characters and houses and settings and how they intertwine. And there's a lot out there for sure. But we wanted to focus just on Oddfellow. So that way, if he does make an appearance, I have more knowledge on my end, and the listeners, you can listen along and maybe learn some stuff too. And if you know all this information, great. If not, strap in, because we got some good stuff, I think. So Jamie is going to talk about the backstory of Oddfellow, and we'll kind of chime in every now and then and just kind of, we'll see where this takes us. So what did you learn about Oddfellow and how he sort of came to be?
Yeah, so luckily, thanks to HHN Wiki and all the contributors there, I found a lot about Dr. Oddfellow, actually. I tried to condense and kind of put it in my own words as much as I could, a lot of his backstory and stuff like that, but pretty interesting for what his development was and some of his story and how he came about and his connection with Jack and stuff like that. I honestly didn't realize how deep it got into, so I'm really excited to talk about this. I think it'll be pretty cool, and reading more about him today and learning more about him today really makes me more amped up, I guess, to possibly have my horror nights. And now reading all this stuff and knowing more about him, I think it would be very interesting. So like I said, there's a lot of information here, so I'm kind of going to try to break it up a little bit. Luckily, I talk kind of quick, so it might go by a little faster. But Nick and Seamus, if you guys want to chime in at any point too, let me know. But I will get started with this. So, owner of Dr. Oddfellow's Carnival of Thrills, Dr. Rich Oddfellow was a circus entrepreneur and also the boss of Jack Schmidt, aka Jack the Clown. After murdering several small children throughout the southern states and evading the FBI, Jack sought out help and possible refuge from Dr. Oddfellow. Ironically, Dr. Oddfellow was wanted by the police for the accidental death of several patrons from years earlier in a freak circus accident, while he was under a different name. Worried that the police would potentially catch him, he asked Jack to show him where he hid the bodies. The bodies of the children were located in 3 small trunks inside of Jack's travel coach. Ultimately, Dr. Oddfellow had Jack murdered in hopes of getting the police off his case. He hid his body in the traveling House of Horrors exhibit along with the bodies of the children. Years later, he then sold his carnival. So that was the first little tidbit of information of how we got from meeting Mr. Dr. Oddfellow, Dr. Rich Oddfellow.
And that was a house?
No, so
story. It's just like some backstory.
This is more of his backstory. I think after I read this part, Nick's going to get a little bit more into it when the breakdown of the years happening of when this happened for his houses. And
yeah,
stuff
we'll
like
go through this whole like story, and then I'll once you're all done with everything, we'll jump into kind of where he's physically been.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'll get back to it. So after selling the carnival, various dark rides and exhibits were split and sent to various owners around the states, including the House of Horrors. Somewhere along the way, Adoru, aka Fear, chose him as one of his heralds. 60 years later, in 1980, a television crew was documenting the Great Dark Rides of America. They stumbled upon the House of Horrors in an abandoned Louisiana junkyard. The smell of decay was overpowering as they pried open the doors of the forgotten exhibit. One of the cameramen stumbled upon a box with a crank handle with the letters JACK outside the box. An eerie musical tune flooded the room as they cranked the handle. Suddenly, the music stopped and the decaying body of Jack popped out attached to a giant spring. After a thorough police investigation, the bodies of Jack and the children were shipped to the local coroner's office. The van that was carrying the body of Jack disappeared into the Louisiana swamp in a freak accident. And now we're getting to our last little bits. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say, it is just crazy that like we had so much of this backstory and this character still is just like this mysterious enigma.
I would have had no clue about any of this, honestly, if I didn't read into so much of it today. Like I said, HHN Wiki, all you people with this information you guys get is truly impressive. I appreciate the help.
It's just like we kind of talked about this. I don't know we have to bring it up every time, but it seems like it goes back towards that Monsters house of last year, Legends Collide. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed the house, but I really enjoyed the backstory of it. But the backstory you don't get from walking through the house. So it's like you're doing all of this world building and storytelling, and unless you're hosting a podcast and researching it, you're not necessarily getting it 100%. Maybe for the diehards, the true HHN fans that go and they do research and they listen to podcasts and they read this stuff, they do. But for the general public, people that are just walking through a house or going to an event, and there's these just page-long treatments of stories and characters, and you're not going to really get that by walking through a 5-minute haunted house. So it's just crazy how in-depth this all is.
It is.
Yeah, and they do. I mean, I know more recently they do some of that backstory podcasting type stuff where they kind of give you some backstory on the At least it was for the icon characters. I don't know how much they do for the houses themselves, but there is backstory you can dig into and read about. But yeah, there's just not enough time in a quick 3 or 4 or 5 minute walkthrough to really give you a full story.
That's why it's
almost like
Go ahead.
If you want, I was gonna say if you want that sort of thing, you have to kind of seek it out.
I was going to say, that's why I really enjoyed the Tooth Fairy house, too, even though they don't really have much lore to HHN in itself. It was a new original. I really liked the whole storybook telling the walkthrough when you first enter the house, how it says it over the intercom with the child talking and stuff like that. So it kind of gives you that little bit of backstory, too.
Whatever that kid's name. Young James
right.
was afraid of the truth. I like that. I really like that.
I did, too, yeah. All right, Tari was taking a sip of beer before I read this last little insert here.
Gotta charge up.
Right? Okay, so later that week, after the disappearance of the van and the disappearance of Jack, the bodies of the cameraman and host were found as the victims of a grisly and unsolved murder. Throughout the following years, urban legend retellings of the tale started, with a corresponding story about the decomposing body of Jack killing again. He was seeking out revenge on Dr. Oddfellow for having him murdered. Jack was taken to Shadybrook Rest Home and Sanitarium, where he was born and ultimately escaped, and went in search of Dr. Oddfellow. Jack stalked the tents of the once carnival and murdered Dr. Oddfellow and took his most prized possession, a silver-headed cane of souls, which is presumably kept Oddfellow alive and in motion for 80 years. Okay. And that is what we have for the backstory of Dr. Oddfellow.
Yeah, so he's just kind of left. It's really an afterthought. He really is just a footnote on Jack's long tenured history.
You don't really know a whole lot about him. I mean, even some of the diehards that I've spoken to or that I know personally, like even they don't bring him up. So it's like it's like he was kind of there when Jack first started, but then Jack kind of took center stage, which is probably what they wanted anyways, but he definitely feels like there's more to it that would have maybe even made Jack, for me, more interesting.
Yeah, I think so as well, because and maybe this is the year, and I don't know why they waited this long to revisit this or, bring this part up, but it is a good story. It seemed like a very cool character, and if you're going to take that much time to make him a forefront of Jack's history and to not really mention him, as much as any of the other icons. It's a little crazy. So I'll be interested to see it this year. I'm excited for it. This gets me more excited for it because it does tie into it. And if they do focus this house more on Oddfellow, kind of flipping the script and now seeking revenge on Jack again, it's kind of like the constant duel. I'm more interested in that. I don't want to see. I'm along the lines with Seamus. I don't need another Jack house. I'm not a huge, Jack fan. He's fine. He's up there, but he's not my number one guy.
Yeah, I don't hate him. He just is what he is. I mean,
he's fine.
Yeah, he's good for what he does for the event, and he obviously has a very big fan base. So there's nothing wrong with that. He doesn't. It's like for me, it's like I said it before. I think way back in one of our anniversary episodes, where it's like I'm just not big on the idea of. I know they didn't intentionally do this, but it does kind of give off like Joker vibes or just scary clowns, which is pretty common in horror in general. But yeah, it just doesn't do much for me. But with that said, I'll say it again. I think that I would find some interest in kind of learning some of this backstory for sure.
And that's the thing too. I feel like you really can't have Dr. Oddfellow without mentioning Jack, because honestly, a lot of the research I was doing and stuff too, I feel like he plays such a big role in part of his life and stuff like that. And when they go over his whole backstory and everything.
Yeah, I would agree that you need Jack to tell the story. Like you can't do this without Jack for sure.
But maybe not the main character. I do hope that if it does come in some sort of house or scare zone of sorts, I hope he's more of the main icon in it versus Jack. Even though I do love Jack, but it would be nice to see more of him retold.
Definitely. Yeah, and you'd have to bring it up to speed. We have the story from start to stop where it ends with Oddfellow dying, Jack sort of assuming that ringmaster role. So we can't really, there's no time frame really that we could be like, oh, well, this was a prequel. This happened, back in this time, because there would be no conflict at that point. We've seen that. So it does have to bring it up to current day, I'd say, where if we do get Jack, it's at the, maybe it's a Legends Collide style ending where he's killing Oddfellow's killing Jack or something like that and beheading him. So it does have to, I think, in my mind, take place sort of in current day and being like, well, you've kind of run the show long enough. It's time for the true leader to come back.
Mm-hmm. For him to get his time to shine. Yes.
So let's jump into a couple of the instances that Oddfellow was supposedly appearing. So the first appearance would be HHN 10, and this was the Fear House. Now we talked about this quickly on our previous episode, our first ever remake, sequel, or pass episode, because we did years 1 through 10. So this was towards the tail end of that one. So we were probably tired at the end of that marathon. But this house was allegedly, I say allegedly because again, the records are not 100%, but this one was allegedly centered around Dr. Oddfellow and not Jack, but it took place in an evil funhouse called, you guessed it, the Fear House, which contained just a bunch of evil clowns. This house was located over in New York at the Nazerman's Pawn Shop location, and you would enter it through Sting Alley, which is where most recently they had the Meaty Meats food booth. That was this last year? Or was that 2 years ago?
That was this year. Yeah,
I think it was this year.
Yeah. Yep. So right in that little entrance is where you would jump into. This comes from a description, and I'll sort of just read this off, but this was a description from the Universal Art and Design presentation, the manuscript for HHN 10. And again, this was found on HHN Wiki. But this was, welcome to Dr. Rich Oddfellow's Carnival of Oddities. Looking for a good scare or just a glimpse into the world of the weird? There's nothing subtle about Dr. Oddfellow's Carnival. Join the Dark Doctor in his funhouse of thrills and chills. And then it just kind of is a walkthrough essentially of, they just described it as very disorienting, just a big variety of clowns. There was a lot of mirror scares. One scare that is written about is very reminiscent to me as a scare in the Weekend House, because there was a character supposedly covered in like the tarps that are used to break up the rooms, and a character was kind of hidden in that to kind of like hide in plain sight, I guess. The facade was a big, long door to a building that says Thrills, the Fear House. And on that building was paintings of clown faces with sharp teeth, and the door was going through his mouth. And there was a big, long red carpet coming out from the door, so it looked like a big tongue. So it wasn't, again, it's hard to find a complete description of everything that was in this house. There were no pictures of this house. The only picture was a picture of the front, and then a couple artist renditions of stuff that would be in the house. So concept art, one being of the same picture of the facade. So not much super revealing from that, but that was his first appearance at a actual HHN event. Now there was rumors that he was a character in this house, again unconfirmed. The next time that there was even a mention of Oddfellow was HHN 17, and this was really only done through a link on the website, so there wasn't much else out there. It was pretty much a link that you would find for the Carnival of Carnage show, and if you did, there was a little poster, and it was the tale of Jack. And this is pretty much a lot of the same information that Jamie had talked about, but this is where I believe they got the information. So it was presented at 17 on the website, and it pretty much just stated that Jack wanted to be the ringmaster. He wanted to be the proprietor of Darkness himself. So he returned to his old stomping grounds, the Dark Carnival and Emporium. You mentioned, Jamie, that he went in at night and kind of tent by tent took his revenge. So then when he was done, he walked out of the tent. He was wearing his newly acquired ringmaster outfit, the top hat, and the silver-headed cane of souls, which you mentioned. But it was funny that this was like mentioned on the website, but it didn't really make its way into the event at all. So again, we're getting like breadcrumbs here of history of Oddfellow.
And I love that. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I love that interactiveness that they do, and I really used to like it when they did the websites up so much and you could read these stories about the characters and stuff like that. And I feel like how you said, I feel like if you weren't really into it and looking on there, you probably would have never seen something like that. And it's a really cool little piece of like fun fact and history that you could learn about. And I just wish it was somewhere more prominent in the event.
Yeah, and I think back then too, this was obviously Twitter and all that stuff. So, and obviously the event was a much lower in scale as far as guests go. So I think like if you were going to the event, you were on that website checking and reading the stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Versus today, I don't ever go to really the Horror Nights website. It's, there's nothing on there that I don't already need to know from other, avenues.
Mm-hmm. And that used to be one of my favorite parts about it, was going on the websites and seeing everything before, and they would do like little videos along and pictures along with the houses and little like interactive games, and it was just really fun, and I wish they would still do stuff like that.
Yeah, and again, that was pretty much the way to learn all of the information. So it makes sense that it's not as prevalent today, but
I was going to say, nowadays you're not really checking the website and stuff like that. You already, with social media, you get everything. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they put out a 2-minute teaser online, and it's got millions of views already. And then the last time, and this wasn't a presence of Oddfellow, but it was a mention, which was in the Tribute Store of 2020. And if you remember, if you were able to come during that, light year or whatever, in the Tribute Store, there was a traveling wagon that did say Oddfellow's Dark Carnival and Emporium. And that was where Jack the Clown's outfit was laid out. And his little ticket of Oddfellow's Circus was actually also on the Midnight Syndicate vinyl casing. But those are really, just a little image. It was,
oh, that's fun.
It looked like a ticket almost. And that was, we kind of pushed that out on our Instagram a month or two ago, I think, at that point. But on one of the Midnight Syndicate vinyls, if you open it up, I think it was the Legendary Truth style one, and it had clipping of that looked like a coupon as an entrance ticket to Dr. Oddfellow's Dark Carnival and Emporium.
Oh,
so
I remember looking at that. Yeah.
So that wagon was pretty much like a blink and you miss it. And again, at this day and age too, when you see that, I'd say most people seeing that are not going to know what that means. They're going to look past it, and maybe it's a 50-50 swing if somebody actually researches what it means or not. So it was kind of a glanced over, I'd say. But those are the real appearances at HHN. That's Oddfellow's history. So now I guess we can kind of open the floor for discussion of how we feel about this possibly being here.
I mean, like I had mentioned before, now after looking more into it and learning more about him and stuff like that, I am really down to hopefully have him at the event. I think it would be something new. I know we talked about it's been done before. He'd been briefly mentioned at Carnival of Carnage, and he was at HHN 10 with his own house, but I feel like we've never really got to see him in full capacity. And I've mentioned it before, but I love the fun house, carnival style, dark carnival kind of vibe. So I know I'd definitely be down for it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more I can say that if it was going to happen, I'd want to see like a take on this character for sure. I don't really care so much whether Jack's in it or not, but obviously he kind of has to be part of it because he's part of the story. But yeah, I'd be down to see it.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I do love it's crazy that with our takes that I'm not a huge Jack the Clown fan. I just think the clown character is overplayed, but I am a fan of a cool little freak showy carnival themed house. So that's what I hope that this potential house kind of leans into. I'm hoping it's more carnival style themed. I think we talked about it previously that it would be cool if this is in a sprung tent, if they did like an overlay of the whole thing of a projection and kind of made it look like a tarped off yellow and red, whatever.
That'd be awesome.
Style carnival.
And I know they could probably do it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, they've done it it was done with Wicked Growth, right? It was supposed to be a complete pumpkin projection, but
I remember
due
that
to storms and stuff like that, I think it wasn't completed. But there was talks of that house was supposed to be a giant orange pumpkin, essentially.
Oh, that would have been so fun.
So maybe that's something we can get with this one. I would love to see it. I mean, it already looks just like a tent. It is a tent, sprung tent. It's in the name. But to have it actually lit up to look like that, and you could even have somebody out front, a style of ringmaster. I guess you can't really have it as just Jack out there out front, but someone welcoming you to the carnival, a megaphone, a big old twisty mustache, big suspenders, that style. And then you could have a callback to some of the older houses where like the fun house, the fear house and their carnival carnage house, where they have the big poster boards of like, here's the bearded lady, here's the lizard man, here's the tattoo freak or whatever,
classic like circus.
Yeah, just really playing into that trope. I think that would be really, really fun. And I just would love to see some, I don't want to say closure, but I'd like to see Oddfellow trying to get his comeuppance and play into the whole fact that Jack pretty much stole his life. What do you think about this tying into that overall theme? Do you think Oddfellow would be an icon? Do you think it's just kind of a house?
I think it would just be a house. I think
kind
of like how the Scary House was, where it's like it kind of puts you into that world, but they're not gonna like have like any type of icon specifically in there.
Yeah, because there's been mentions. I'm curious too, because it's one of those things too with these videos. All of the legend is real. What is this legend? All those weird runes and stuff like that. I'm just curious where that plays into, especially with all the speculative IPs and originals and stuff like that. Where do the terms like the legend and stuff really apply? And as far as I can see, this would be the one that the legend of Jack is sort of where it ties into. So I'd be curious if they would put that much trust, I guess, into Oddfellow as an icon.
Right. True.
Without people knowing too much about him.
Yeah. So I think they'd have to start pushing stuff out soon. I mean, the legend, whatever, should be answered shortly. So that way people are prepared and have time to understand what this is. Because if you just drop this in your August original dump, I guess is pretty much just what it's called. But if you just throw this out there in August and you suspect Oddfellow is going to be your icon and it's going to take off, this is a character that needs to be researched a little bit for people to fully understand. So I think they need to kind of start feeding us more information in these announcement videos and unveiling the story a little bit of what is this legend we are talking about? Why is this a thing? Are we going to connect it or not? That's what needs to be answered sooner rather than later, I think.
Yeah, they would have to start pushing out lore. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Shane.
No, you go ahead. No, and I was just going to say, even though we've only had 2 official announcements so far, I feel like generally every year it kind of does follow a theme. And I feel like this year, from hearing the other rumors and speculations and stuff like that, I feel like it doesn't really have that like core theme or like core icon yet, like set in stone. So I feel like more so that's why I would see it being as just a house and maybe not him being the full icon for the event in itself, but you never know.
Yeah, I'd be very curious to see if they do tie him in an icon role. I think it would make more sense to just kind of leave it as a house, but then again, maybe they do like an overall, I don't want to say an overall carnival theme because they're not even hinting at that, but some sort of legend, I mean, he is the legend of Horror Nights, essentially, is what gave birth to the main icon. So
pretty much
he is, he does need to get his, what is the word? His recognition, I'd say, as, playing such a pivotal role in the Jack storyline.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those things that you do kind of have to give him some sort of due. And maybe that's what they're leading up to, too. I mean, it could be leading up to like, hey, here's the birth of the icons. Because like you just said, Jack is kind of like the original. And this is like the guy that created Jack, more or less. So,
because you could reel in with some of the stuff I was reading about him too. Fear kind of plays a part in it as well, and we've never really had him, or have we had him as a full-on icon for only 1 year? I think we did 1 year, right?
1 year, yes.
1 year we did, yeah. But I feel like he's really not talked about as much, and I really enjoyed his walkthrough in his section of the Icon's house and really made me appreciate him a little bit more. But I feel like he does play somewhat of a role for him summoning Jack as one of his heralds and stuff like that. And Eddie even too, I know that's pretty kind of a stretch, but Eddie being too Jack's brother and stuff like that, he didn't really get his chance, and maybe he'll be involved in some capacity in the house, or Jack and Eddie go against Dr. Oddfellow, I don't know, something. But
no, I think that's actually not a bad idea too. I mean, kind of how they tie in all those characters together, because it is kind of loose. It's definitely a little loose with, where does Eddie come from? I know that he's Jack's brother, but what is the backstory there? And so it'd be interesting to kind of get a little bit more information about that.
Because I forgot about it, because his year was supposed to be when 9/11 happened,
right,
and they scrapped it.
Right.
So
yeah, he also has been kind of pushed to the side.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So a lot of information there. So hopefully we didn't just do all that for nothing. Hopefully that there's a little Oddfellow announcement.
100%. We're not going to get anything having to do with them at all. That was just a big joke. We're
if
all
not, we learned some fun.
Yeah, we learned together. Exactly. It's all that matters.
And that's the true legend. We're all learning together. So before we sign off, let's get into our horror movies of the week. What we've sort of been watching. I watched, thanks to listening to episodes of Podmortem, which if you don't listen to them, you should go check them out. They did an episode on 1408. Actually, I think they did it a long time ago, but I ended up having to rewatch 1408 because that movie is just,
it is a good movie.
I love it.
Oh man, it's so good.
John Cusack, Samuel Jackson, and it's crazy that this was all taken just from a short story. This wasn't a Stephen King novel. This was just a short story from King.
Yep. Actually, you'd be surprised how many of his movies and stuff is taken from a short story.
Yeah, they just pull.
But there's so much you can flesh out. But that's a whole other discussion. We could do a whole podcast just on Stephen King. But yeah, it is a great movie.
But yeah, he's just whacked. That movie is so good. It's just John Cusack carrying the whole movie, essentially. I mean, it's besides the intro, it's him just going crazy in his room.
Yeah, it's him kind of breaking down and losing his mind.
And then lastly, if you are not following us on Twitter, this past weekend I started playing The Last of Us. And I have been doing a live tweeting thread when I am playing. So I will probably find some free time this weekend. So if you enjoy me sending out angry tweets and then like super, super cocky tweets about how good I'm getting at the game, and then just 5 minutes later getting my absolute shit rocked, then follow us on Twitter, because it is probably way more fun for you than it is for me. But I have passed the Pittsburgh level. I think I'm like 6 levels into it, or chapters, however games work nowadays. But I can see where they're going to pull some stuff. You know, in the description of the announcement, they did mention that we're going to be going through the streets of Pittsburgh. So I tried to take my time in the Pittsburgh area. That was probably the biggest or longest chapter that I had gone through. That took me most of like a day to get through. But there's a lot of stuff there that I think could be pulled from. So if you follow us on Twitter, or even if you don't, go check us out, because you'll find a giant thread of just angry tweets of me getting mad about how shitty I am at playing video games now.
It looks really creepy from what I've seen you playing.
It is. There's a lot of scares. Anybody that has any doubts, or maybe they've only seen the show, yes, the show dials up the character development and dials back the actual violence and the creatures. But this is the game. The house is on the game. So don't worry about that. There's going to be plenty of creatures. There's going to be plenty of scares. This house is not going to be a room of Joel and Ellie taking a stroll and talking about their feelings.
No.
Not at all.
No.
I would have
so
to
what
feel
else did anybody get into?
No, I was just going to say before we do that, I would guess that I bet the house is going to be more monster and setting from the game and from the game than it is anything about with Joel and Ellie.
Oh yeah, I could see it being. You could do this house without them,
and that's what I'm thinking is gonna. I don't think they're gonna be completely devoid of those characters, but they won't play a huge role in the house. I don't think.
Not as frequent. Maybe like in the beginning.
Yeah, right. First scene, you get them, but then the rest of it's kind of you walking through the movie or the show or the game or whatever.
Yeah, and you could do the voiceovers of like Joel and Ellie, like, "Hey, go this way" or whatever. Yep. But then the fucking bloater's there, and you know, shit goes sideways real quick, and then 47 shivs later, you're still dead. I've learned how to make shivs very quickly. What else has everybody been watching this week?
I just started the latest season of American Horror Story, the one you were talking about last week.
God, did it get you into it?
Yeah, I did. Well, I knew now knowing that it was available. I was like, oh well, now I got to go watch it. So yeah, I went and started that, and it's really good. I won't lie, it's really good. So
it is good.
Yeah, I liked that season a lot. I'd be curious if you have the same thoughts I do about the ending. A couple episodes are sort of tacked on, but once you get there, we can talk about that.
Oh, I'm sure we will.
And I was also going to mention 1408 as something I watched. I didn't really watch too much this past week, honestly, but 1408, such a good movie. Haven't watched it in years, and I honestly forgot how creepy and just tense it is in the whole film. And John Cusack is just so good. And I don't know if we had mentioned it before, but Nick and I had went to a Q&A with him and filming for one of his movies, and I wish I would have asked him something about 1408 because no one else did. No one even brought it up, and I think he did so well in it. It's just an all-around really good watch.
Yeah, it's a classic. Mm-hmm. So that wraps up this week. Again, before we wrap up completely, HHN at home still going on. So go to our Twitter to enter our contest to get a free shirt. Our shirts are on sale. Also, we have our Shutter Sunday series going. So go to our YouTube page, follow it, subscribe it, share, like, comment, whatever, all you got to do. But Shutter Sundays, we are doing, Jamie and myself, little 10 to 15 minute reviews on movies that we find on Shutter. You can only hear and only see that on our YouTube page. So if you do like our content, go there because there's some more for you. We will be putting out what we're going to be watching. Did you figure out what we're going to watch yet?
I think I want to go with that movie I'd mentioned before, if you're cool with that one.
Yeah. Do you remember which one that is?
So
what am I getting myself into?
So also kind of relating to HHN at home and being Pride Month and everything, I wanted to do a LGBTQ oriented main character movie. So I was looking some up on Shudder and I found a movie called Spiral, which is a Shudder original movie. And I thought that would be a good movie to watch for this week. And I think it has pretty good reviews on it that I've seen so far. I think it's more of a culty, demonic-esque film, which I'm usually pretty into that. So I think it should be a pretty good watch.
So Spiral, not Spiral, the Book of Saw.
No, not Spiral, the Book of Saw.
Not Chris Rock.
No.
Gotcha. All right. So that's what we'll be getting into on Shutter Sundays. Last week we did Deadstream. So if you have ever seen or heard that movie, go check that video out. But I think that about wraps it up. Hopefully we get an announcement coming up soon. We are in that season where it's very unpredictable. Stuff could drop at any moment. So until then, and until next time, this is Nick.
This is Seamus.
This is Jamie.
Happy haunts.
It's cursed. Cursed. It's got a death curse.
You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare,
And again, I would just like to thank Vampire Stepdad for letting us use his music for our intro and outro music. So if you would, just go check him out. Spotify, Facebook. Again, that is Vampire Stepdad.